It was the evening of February 28th, 2012. 6 p.m. Inside the Connally Unit in Livingston, Texas. The mood was heavy. George Rivas, age 41, sat quietly in his death row cell. The steel walls around him had never felt colder. He didn't say much. He didn't ask for anything, because he already knew. This was his last night alive. His final appeal had been denied earlier that day. No delays, no legal tricks, no clemency. The state of Texas had made its decision. Tomorrow, on February 29th, a date that only comes once every 4 years, George Rivas would die by lethal injection. But how did a boy from a decent neighborhood, with good grades and a clean reputation, become the most dangerous prisoner in Texas? Why was he about to be executed while thousands of other death row inmates still sat waiting? To answer that, we need to rewind the clock, not just 24 hours, but decades. Welcome to The Final Crime, the channel where we take you step by step through the final hours of the world's most dangerous criminals. Today, we dive into the chilling last day of George Rivas, a man once described as quiet, intelligent, and deadly. He planned one of the boldest prison escapes in American history, but in the end, his life ended with a whisper. George Angel Rivas Jr. was born in El Paso, Texas, in 1970. As a kid, he seemed bright. He wasn't violent. He wasn't wild. In fact, many people who knew him then would say he was polite, calm, and smart. He did well in school and got along with his teachers. He read often. He was curious. To anyone watching, George was going to grow up to be something big. Maybe a lawyer, maybe a businessman. No one expected him to become a killer, but behind that quiet and focused look, George Rivas had something darker. He didn't like being told what to do. He hated being under control. He had a strong desire for independence. He began stealing. First, small things, then bigger risks. By the time he was in his early 20s, he had formed a group that committed robberies all across Texas. These weren't random crimes. Rivas didn't just grab and run. He planned every detail like a military operation. He used maps, stopwatches, and walkie-talkies. He studied the locations, escape routes, and even how long the police would take to arrive. Some robberies involved masks, some used fake license plates. And in most of them, he and his crew got away. Eventually, though, George Rivas was caught, and when he faced the court, the judge made it clear there would be no second chances. Rivas was sentenced to 18 life sentences for robbery, kidnapping, and using deadly weapons. He would never see the outside world again, or so they thought. In the late 1990s, Rivas was sent to the Connally Unit, a maximum security prison in Kennedy, Texas. It was supposed to be escape-proof. Armed guards, high walls, steel doors. But that didn't scare him. Rivas was already thinking ahead. He knew that most people there had given up, but not him. He started observing the guards, their schedules, where the cameras pointed, and where the blind spots were. He watched how food was delivered, how tools were checked out, and how keys were handed off. Then, slowly, he started recruiting. He looked for inmates with discipline, not just strength, but obedience. He found 6 of them: Joseph Garcia, Randy Halprin, Larry Harper, Patrick Murphy, Michael Rodriguez, and Donald Newberry. Together, they became known as the Texas 7. Rivas trained them in secret. He gave each man a role. One would handle security cameras. Another would work with tools. Someone else would keep track of time. And finally, after months of preparation, they were ready. December 13th, 2000, it was just after lunch. Most inmates had returned to their cells. But Rivas and the other 6 men stayed back, pretending they had work duty. In under an hour, they managed to overpower 9 civilian workers and 4 prison officers. They tied them up, stole their keys, uniforms, and identification badges, and threw them into an electrical room. Using a back hallway, they reached a maintenance truck parked outside. Dressed in stolen uniforms and pretending to be repairmen, they drove it right out of the prison gate. No one stopped them. No one even knew they were gone. until hours later. It was one of the biggest and most embarrassing prison breaks in Texas history. And it wasn't over. Once outside, the Texas 7 disappeared fast. They traveled from town to town, sleeping in motels, camping out in vans, and robbing stores to stay alive. They took what they needed, food, cash, weapons, then moved on. But Rivas had a bigger plan. He wanted to flee the country, maybe to Mexico, maybe to Canada. But first, they needed more money. On December 24th, 2000, Christmas Eve, the group targeted a large sporting goods store in Irving, Texas. Inside were rows of guns, ammo, and cash registers. It was perfect. But someone triggered a silent alarm. Officer Aubrey Hawkins, 29 years old, responded to the call. He didn't know what he was walking into. When Hawkins arrived, the Texas 7 ambushed him. He was shot 11 times. His gun was taken. His body dragged out of his car. He died at the scene, leaving behind a wife and a young son who would grow up without a father. That murder changed everything.
The killing of Officer Hawkins shocked the entire country. Law enforcement agencies from all over Texas and even the FBI joined forces. The Texas 7 became the most wanted fugitives in America. Their faces were all over the news, on the radio, and in every police station across the state. The group fled north, hoping to reach Canada, but with their faces being shown on America's Most Wanted, time was running out. A tip came in from Colorado. A man believed he had seen some of them at a trailer park in Woodland Park. Police moved in fast. There was a brief standoff. One of the members, Larry Harper, took his own life rather than be captured. The others surrendered peacefully. After 42 days on the run, the Texas 7 were finally caught. Back in Texas, the courtroom was packed. Rivas didn't deny being the mastermind behind the breakout, but he claimed he never pulled the trigger on Officer Hawkins. He insisted that the plan was never supposed to lead to anyone dying. Under the felony murder rule, anyone involved in a felony that leads to someone's death can be charged with murder, especially the person who planned it all. Prosecutors painted Rivas as cold, calculated, and in control. They said without his planning, none of the others would have escaped. Without his leadership, Officer Hawkins would still be alive. The jury believed them. It didn't take long for the verdict. Guilty of capital murder. And the sentence? Death by lethal injection. For the families watching, especially the widow of Officer Hawkins, it was a moment of justice. For Rivas, it was the beginning of a long wait. After the trial, Rivas was transferred to the Connally Unit, Texas's death row for male inmates. It was a cold, lonely place. No roommates, no physical contact. Inmates spent 23 hours a day inside tiny concrete cells with heavy steel doors. Their only break was 1 hour alone in a fenced cage outside. Rivas was locked inside a 6 by 10 foot cell. No bars, no windows, just a slot for food trays and a bed made of metal and foam. But even here, he kept his mind sharp. He read books, he wrote letters, he stayed in contact with his family. He married a woman named Sherry by proxy through paperwork, not ceremony. They spoke often. She visited when she could. Over the years, Rivas filed appeal after appeal. He claimed the trial was unfair, that the jury was biased, that he hadn't killed anyone. But every appeal failed. The courts were firm. By early 2012, the date was set. George Rivas would be executed on February 29th, a leap day.
February 28th, 2012. The day before his execution, Rivas was moved to a death watch cell. It was just 15 feet from the execution chamber. The cell was cold, quiet, and watched by guards 24/7. He didn't talk much, but he didn't cry either. He wrote letters. He read his Bible. He prayed with the chaplain. He made one last call to Sherry. That evening, 4 officers stood outside his cell. They spoke softly. They made notes. They watched closely, looking for signs of panic. But Rivas stayed calm. One officer later said, "It was like he had already said goodbye." February 29th, execution day.
The next morning, just before sunrise, the cell door opened. A guard called his name. Rivas stood, already dressed in the clean white uniform worn by all condemned inmates. He was offered breakfast: scrambled eggs, toast, oatmeal, and juice. He barely touched it. Not because he wasn't hungry, but because it didn't matter. At 12 p.m., he was shackled at the wrists and ankles. 2 guards walked him down a short hallway to a waiting prison van. There was no talking, no last-minute resistance, just silence. The van left the Connally Unit and drove 40 miles to the Walls Unit in Huntsville, home of Texas's execution chamber. A police escort followed behind, including several officers from Irving who had come to witness justice for Officer Hawkins. When Rivas arrived, he was processed one last time. Fingerprints, medical check, identity confirmed. He was placed in a small holding cell near the chamber. There, he was allowed to make a few final calls. He spoke to Sherry again. He told her, "I'll be waiting for you." She later said that his voice didn't tremble. He wasn't afraid. Final meal. Texas had banned custom last meals the year before, after a high-profile case where an inmate ordered a feast and refused to eat it. So, Rivas was served the same thing every other inmate got: barbecued chicken, corn and beans, bread, sweet tea. He didn't ask for more. He didn't complain. He ate slowly, quietly, and left very little behind. At 5:30 p.m., witnesses began to arrive. 2 rooms were prepared, one for the victim's family, the other for Rivas's loved ones. On one side sat members of Officer Hawkins's family, fellow police officers, and state officials. On the other side sat Rivas's wife, his sister, and 2 close friends. At 5:45 p.m., the chaplain entered first. He walked over to the gurney and placed a hand gently on it. Then George Rivas entered. He walked on his own. No struggle, no hesitation. He climbed onto the gurney, laid down, and allowed the straps to be fastened across his arms, chest, and legs. 2 IV lines were placed in his arms. The sheet was pulled up to his chest. He stared through the glass, eyes locking with his wife and sister. The warden stepped forward. "Do you have a final statement?" Rivas nodded. He spoke clearly. "To the family of Officer Hawkins, I'm truly sorry, not just because I'm here, but because I know you deserve peace. I hope you find it." He turned to the other room. "To my wife, Sherry, I love you more than words can say. To my sister, thank you for always being there. To my friends, to the guys on the row, thank you for your respect." He looked straight ahead and said, "Take care of yourselves. I'll be waiting. I love you. God bless. I'm ready." At 6:02 p.m., the lethal drugs began to flow. A sedative first. Rivas's breathing slowed. He looked toward his wife and mouthed, "I love you," once, twice, 3 times. Then his eyes fluttered. His chest moved once, then stopped. 6:22 p.m. A doctor stepped forward, checked his pulse. There was none. Time of death, 6:22 p.m. George Rivas, the leader of the Texas 7, was gone. There was no cheering, no celebration, just silence. The guards stood still. The families filed out. His body was removed through a back hallway, tagged and prepared for burial. The police officers who had waited 11 years to see this walked out into the night. Quiet. Thoughtful. Some called it closure. Others simply called it the end. George Rivas didn't fire the gun, but he planned the escape. He gave the orders. He led the men. He set the wheels in motion. And under the law, that made him just as guilty. He once said, "I called it freedom, but in the end, the price of that freedom was his life." This was the final 24 hours of George Rivas. For more true crime stories told with respect and truth, subscribe to The Final Crime. What do you think? Did justice come too late, or did the mastermind deserve to face the gurney? Tell us in the comments below.